Well, hello again, all my classic dirt bike loving YouTubers, and welcome back once more to my brand new vintage off-road internet channel, Classic Dirt Bike TV, where we feature all those long lost off-road classics from back in the day. And so this time round we are going to take a look at another British iconic classic as we check out Ian Ridley's very nice 1975 CCM. Now, almost straight away you can see that Ian's particular bike is not like many of the other CCMs featured here on my channel, although it still is an authentic Alan Clews classic. But it's just that Ian has had his machine painted in his own blue and yellow livery. Now, this featured bike of Ian's is just one of the many machines he has in his private collection, and Ian has many of these Alan Clews CCM bikes, including a fully restored 1972 Clews Stroker that was one of the last of 6 bikes ever built by the CCM factory. Now, Ian originally bought this bike from another CCM racer called Keith Barnes more than 10 years ago, and Keith had many race wins on this bike before he then sold it to Ian. Now, of course, in 1975 this is exactly what these bikes would have looked like as we look at this picture of the late Vic Eastwood's winning machine from that particular year. Now, these bikes would have had this yellow tank and this gold coloured plated side cover. Now, we do have some old video footage of Keith's bike prior to it being sold to Ian, so let's just have a look at Keith's old bike in action on the track. Now, this footage was taken at the Cumberland Grand National some years ago, and that rider that we're looking at the moment is the great Tim Manton on that big massive Jawa. Now, as they make the turn, Keith is already up to 3rd place on the yellow tanked CCM. Now, as they make the turn, you can see Keith is challenging already for that 2nd place spot. A very quick bike, this 500 CCM. As you see, Keith is making his move on Tim Manton to take the lead of this race. Very quick bikes. But you can see exactly how this bike looked like back in the day, with the yellow tank and the white mudguards. And as you can see, a very quick bike with Keith on board, and he's already starting to open up a lead on the chasing pack. Tim Manton still coming through in 2nd place. Now, that was race 1. Now this is race 2 as the bikes lined up to leave the line. Look out for Keith once again on the yellow tank. It's a good start from John Bethel and Tim Manton. Keith there going round on the outside. Looks like Keith's already up to 2nd position. And Tim Manton on this big massive Jawa was very quick on the day. And there's Keith up into 2nd place on the 75 CCM. Of course, these bikes were made famous by the late Vic Eastwood, who was a works rider for the CCM factory back in the day, and Vic Eastwood took these 75 CCMs to many victories over the years that he rode for the Alan Clews factory. But as you can see, Keith is very quick on this old bike. Tim Manton still in 2nd place. And just if you get these bikes set up and get the right rider on board, these big 4-stroke B50s, derived BSA engines are almost unstoppable if you get them set up right. But it looks like Keith is heading for his second win of the day on this lovely 1975 CCM. But this little short video clip is just to give you an idea what the bike looked like prior to Keith selling this bike to Ian, and then of course Ian putting his very own personalised paint job on this particular bike. So it's another win for Keith Barnes. Now, just in case you didn't know, the motor is a single cylinder 500cc B50 BSA 4-stroke motor with the engine casings made out of magnesium as another weight saving to keep the overall weight of the total bike down. Now, a 3-speed gearbox of course is standard, although with the huge torque developed by these big 4-stroke singles, you really only need one gear for getting off the line and another for getting you around the track. Now, I also have it on good authority that this motor was actually one of the engines that came from one of a set of 12 CCMs that the Alan Clews factory built for the Sultan of Oman, who used the bikes in his motorcycle display team. Anyhow, the story goes that after the bikes were used, years later they were then found again, along with all their associated spare parts, languishing in an old aircraft hangar in Oman. Nevertheless, soon after purchasing the bike, Ian handed the engine to Roger Taylor, who knows these Alan Clews motors inside out, and he did a full rebuild of the engine. Now, these are old BSA B50 engines, and when Alan Clews got his hands on these engines, he did some fantastic things with them. Now, from what I can remember, these 1975 CCMs had these Italian-made Marzocchi forks fitted. Now, these were very good forks for these old CCMs, and once you got them set up right, they performed pretty well. Now, the rear shocks on Ian's bike look about right for the time period, as these would have been originally Girling suspension units from 1975, although I'm not entirely sure about these particular suspension units or what make they actually are, but they certainly look right for this bike, and it's maybe just because these shocks have been repainted in the silver colour that they're not so easily identifiable. Now, the fuel tanks on these 75 CCMs were of course made of fiberglass, and as I mentioned earlier, this would have originally been painted yellow, although this blue colour is still very pleasing to the eye. And of course these fuel tanks were then finished off with this Monza style fuel cap on top. Now, as far as motocross bike racing seats go, they don't come any more plush than this one fitted to Ian's CCM. And for the 1970s, the saddle fitted to these old horses was about the best in the business you could get. Once again, it's matched with the blue colour to go with the rest of the livery on this machine. Now, naturally, there was no oil tank on these CCMs in 1975, as the oil for the motor was housed inside the frame front down tube, and then of course fed through an external filter system fitted just in front of the engine block. Now the ignition system is by the well-proven interspan system, whereby you charge the combined battery and ignition unit prior to racing and then fit the unit into the bike, which normally gives you enough power for a full race event. Although of course many riders kept these topped up in between races. Now if you look carefully, you can see that Ian appears to have added a second lever at the clutch end of the handlebars, which is quite unusual on one of these CCM bikes, and I can only assume that this is for some kind of engine decompressor. Now another nice upgrade on this bike was to have an alloy airbox manufactured to replace what would have been the original fiberglass or plastic item. Now, as with all these 1975 CCMs, the mounts for the bike's footrests were machined directly onto the engine casings. Although once again, as you can see, Ian has upgraded the original foot pegs by fitting a pair of these heavy duty Raptor titanium pegs, which are of course British made right here in the UK. Now as you can see here, Ian's bike still has the original CCM rear hub that was fitted when it came from the Bolton factory in 1975, and there are not many of these old CCMs that still have these original magnesium hubs fitted. Well, these old B50 engines were absolutely great old 4-stroke machines, and as I mentioned earlier, if you got these things set up right with the right rider on board, they were more than capable of holding their own on any motocross track. And of course here we can see a few pictures of Ian enjoying his 1975 CCM. Of course completely different from when Keith owned the bike. Ian has put his own bespoke paint scheme on this bike, but nevertheless it is still an authentic bike from 1975 despite the very radical paint scheme. So there you have it, a 1975 CCM with the blue and yellow paint scheme, which actually I quite like, although it's not original. Okay, more classic bikes to come up here on my Classic Dirt Bike TV channel, and our next big event is of course the all the glitz and glamour from the 2020 Telford Classic Dirt Bike Show. So make sure you subscribe to my channel in order you don't miss a single machine. This video was brought to you in association with WorldSport, the world's #1 supplier for all your off-road and leisure sportswear. Just visit their online website for more information.